Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. On the wall of the control room, there's a single object that's supposed to end every argument. The Master Arena map, a glowing model of the games, veins of light for tunnels, red blips for tributes, pulsing sensors for every heartbeat and breath. At face value, it's proof that the game makers see everything, control everything, and miss nothing that happens in their own killing field. But here's the real question. If the Capitol's vision is that perfect, how do you explain the victor who beat them at their own system without anyone realizing it? You remember the tributes who broke the games on camera, Katniss with the berries, Beatty trying to fry the arena, even the careers who turned the cornucopia into a spectacle. The Capitol knows how to handle that kind of rebellion. You punish it, you edit it, or you turn it into a bigger show. So why does their map still matter if every obvious disruption just becomes better television? The real threat isn't the tribute who flips the table. It's the one who quietly rewrites the rulebook while pretending to play along. So instead of asking who killed the most tributes, you start to ask a different question. Who understood the games' rules better than the people who wrote them and survived by staying invisible? There is a lot to uncover here because the Capitol's entire promise is that the arena is unbeatable, that every tree and mutt and force field answers to that glowing map. Back then, tributes who drew too much attention got course corrected from the control room. A sudden pack of mutts, a lightning strike that just happens to land. Now imagine a victor who saw the patterns behind those punishments. Time-based mutt releases weather cycles that reset on a loop. Boundaries that respond a fraction too slowly if you test them with a rock instead of your body. This is where we talk about the contradiction at the heart of the system. The Capitol edits broadcasts to hide glitches, reshoots commentary, smooths over any hint that the arena is just a machine with bugs. Yet one victor's win only makes sense if they mapped those very bugs and exploited them. So how do you win that way and not end up on Snow's personal threat list? You play dumb. You underperform in training to get a low score. You avoid flashy kills. You let the careers think you're harmless while you're quietly tracking cannon timing and animal behavior, building a mental map the master display can't show, where the system hesitates, where it lags, where it can be tricked. We're going to cover how a so-called model victor could walk out of the arena crowned as proof the games work, when in reality, they'd just outplayed the entire design. That part matters because it tells you what the Capitol is most desperate to erase. In this video, we're going to reconstruct that hidden victory from lore patterns, arena mechanics, and most of all from the gaps. What didn't make the broadcast? What would a paranoid Capitol cut first? And what does that silence tell you about the one victor the Capitol forgot to fear? Why outsmarting the game makers is more dangerous than winning. Everyone remembers the tribute who screams at the cameras or pulls a stunt in the interview. That's easy to sell to the districts. But the capital's worst nightmare isn't the rebel on stage. It's the victor who quietly proves the games are a solvable puzzle. At face value, the stakes are simple. Survive 23 other tributes, impress sponsors, get out alive. You're thinking about water sources, alliances that won cannon that might be yours. But here's the real question. What if there's a second, invisible game running underneath all of that? One where the real goal is not letting the game makers realize you understand how their arena works, because the arena is supposed to feel divine, random, unquestionable. Fire rains down when they're bored, mutts appear when the plot slows, and the forest stops exactly where the invisible wall says it does. The relationship you're meant to have with it is fear, not pattern recognition. The moment a tribute notices that mutts always appear on a time cycle, or that the boundary shocks are stronger in one quadrant, the illusion shifts. The games stop being fate and start being code. And that part matters because the capital's real fear isn't one rebellious act. It's the idea that tributes across districts might realize the system is predictable, exploitable, and ultimately beatable. Why do they edit broadcasts? Why do they cut away from tributes testing force fields with rocks, or tracking cannon timing against hovercraft arrivals? Why does a tribute who spends hours mapping squirrel paths instead of fighting mysteriously die in an accident the next day? There is a lot to uncover here. Some victors disappear from the narrative, and not just because their games were unpopular. Why are certain years barely mentioned in Caesar's highlight reels? Why does Snow prefer a brutal, messy win over a clever, clean one that exposes a design flaw? A bloody finale tells the districts, the arena devours you. A clever finale whispers, the arena can be outwitted. This is where we talk about victory as the beginning, not the end. Once you're a victor, the games don't stop. The surveillance just changes format. You get the mansion, the phone line to the capital, the promise of safety. But you're also a long-term research subject. Every interview, every mentoring session is the game makers asking, do you know too much? Are you going to teach another tribute that the fog rolls in on a schedule, or that the force field hum drops right before a random event? So a secretly brilliant victor has to survive twice. First, by quietly exploiting patterns, testing boundaries with sticks instead of grand gestures, using bad training scores to stay off the radar, letting louder tributes draw the fire. Then, by playing dumb afterward. Why pretend you stumbled into that safe zone? Why act traumatized instead of analytical in the recap? Because the moment the capital notices their own system has been compromised, the arena isn't the only thing they know how to rig. And the real twist, our forgotten victor may have already started passing that knowledge on in ways the capital still hasn't recognized. Our lens, the tribute who turned the rulebook into a weapon. So this is where we talk about our actual lens. Not the loudest rebel, not the highest kill count. The most dangerous victor in Hunger Games history is the one the capital would call a model citizen, because on paper, they did everything right. In reality, they treated the arena as a solvable puzzle the capital never meant anyone to solve. At face value, the games are chaos, random firestorms, surprise mutts, force fields humming where you least expect them. But here's the real question. How random can a live broadcast be when ratings, schedules, and sponsors are on the line? The answer is, it can't. And that part matters because any system that has to look unbeatable while staying programmable is going to leak patterns. So our thesis is simple. We're going to cover a composite victor who quietly spots those leaks and turns them into weapons. Not with a magic twist, not with fanfiction power-ups, but by reverse engineering what a real tribute could do using canon mechanics, MUT release cycles, canon timing, hovercraft pickups, even how the cameras cut away when something inconvenient happens. Think about the arenas we've already seen. The clock arena in the Quarter Quell, the forest in the first games, where the fire drives Katniss exactly where they want her. Game makers rely on time-based events, directional threats, and predictable boundary responses. Our hidden victor notices when the birds go silent right before a random storm. They count the minutes between cannons. They throw pebbles at empty air until one vanishes into a force field, then memorize that line as a shield. But they never look impressed with themselves on camera. This is the key angle, playing dumb as a survival strategy. The Capitol punishes tributes who look too aware of the system. High training score, defiant interviews, obvious pattern hunting, that invites course corrections from the control room. So our victor deliberately underperforms in training to earn a forgettable score. They answer Caesar's questions with harmless district anecdotes, not theories about arena design. They frame every smart move as an accident or as copying someone else. We're building this victor out of existing hints. Haymitch using the force field, BT reading the wiring, Foxface tracking food supplies and avoiding direct conflict. Historically, some victors win by minimizing their narrative threat to capital control. Our composite just pushes that to its logical extreme: maximum environmental control, minimum on-screen ego. And because this is a lore-grounded composite, not a wish fulfillment story, we also have to follow the Capitol's cameras. The broadcast team edits out anything that smells too much like system knowledge. A tribute staring at the sky, counting, cut away, a MUT wave arriving 1 minute late because the schedule glitched. Add a reaction shot, bury the inconsistency. There is a lot to uncover here. Training scores that are intentionally mediocre, MUT schedules mapped through animal behavior, force field glitches logged in a mental map. Then, after the games, mentoring obligations, Victor's Village isolation, and the quiet problem of what the Capitol does with a victor who understands their rulebook better than some junior game makers. Because if one tribute can solve the arena once, the Capitol has to ask a terrifying question: how many others could learn if that knowledge ever really got out? The game plan: how we'll rebuild a hidden victory. So in this section, we're going to cover the blueprint. If the Capitol's worst fear is one tribute quietly solving the arena, how do you actually do that without ending up accidentally struck by lightning on day 2? First, we need to talk about design. At face value, every arena is sold as this omnipotent death machine. All-seeing cameras, instant MUTs, weather on demand. But here's the real question. If the game makers were truly all-powerful, why do we see the same patterns over and over? Time-based MUT releases, repeating weather cycles, force fields that react in consistent ways. There is a lot to uncover here about how a so-called unbeatable system quietly runs on schedules, presets, and human laziness. This is where we talk about mapping those flaws from the ground. Our first major segment is going to walk through how a careful tribute turns survival into data collection. You're not just hiding from careers, you're timing cannon blasts, watching how long it takes hovercrafts to appear, throwing pebbles at invisible walls to see where the field hums. Why does one edge of the jungle always flood at dusk? Why do the birds vanish 5 minutes before the fog rolls in? Each coincidence is a rule you can write down in your head. But how do you do that without the control room noticing you're testing their toy? That's our second segment, subtle intel gathering. We'll break down how you can probe boundaries, track mutt timing, even fake panic to disguise experiments as flailing. The reason this works is simple. The capital is watching for defiance, not curiosity. A tribute who screams and runs into a force field looks tragic. A tribute who throws a spear at the same spot 3 days in a row looks suspicious. Then we move into case studies. Historical hints of victors who won by being unremarkable on camera, but terrifyingly observant of it. The quiet district kid who got lucky when mutts never reached their hiding place because they'd already mapped the release pattern. The low-scoring tribute who supposedly stumbled into sponsor gifts right before each hazard, when in reality they were predicting the arena's clockwork. We'll ask the uncomfortable question, how many flukes were actually solved, puzzles the capital edited into miracles? Which brings us to the meta segment, the edit. We're going to cover how the capital scrubs broadcasts, trims training footage, and rewrites victor interviews to erase any hint that the system itself can be outsmarted. That part matters because the relationship between district and games depends on one belief. You can be clever inside the maze, but you can never beat the maze itself. And finally, the payoff. We'll end by designing a full, step-by-step run of a games, where one tribute quietly breaks that rule. A tribute who plays dumb, maps the arena, manipulates patterns, and still walks out crowned as the capital's model victor. The one victor they should have feared most. So how do you win the games and make the game makers think it was their idea? That's where we're headed next. Welcome to the arena behind the arena. So before we drop you into that step-by-step arena run, we need to talk about the arena behind the arena. Because if you're new here, this channel doesn't live in the capital highlight reel. It lives in the Victor's Village headspace. The part of you that watches the games and immediately starts asking, what does this feel like from the inside out? What does the victor see that the audience never does? At face value, we're going to cover fun things, arena maps, mutt schedules, why force fields hum at certain times, whether a tribute could really track cannon timing to predict when the game makers are distracted. But here's the real question. What do those tiny details reveal about the relationship between a single terrified tribute and a system built to control them? There is a lot to uncover here. We dive into lore, politics, arena design, the psychology of tributes and victors, and the quiet rules underneath the rules. Why does Snow build victors' villages on hills? Why do some districts develop career pipelines while others treat volunteering as unthinkable? Why does a low training score sometimes keep you safer than a high one? Every video is us pulling on one of those threads. So this is where we talk about the games as a machine. Not just who wins, but why the machine needs certain winners at certain times. Most channels stop at character breakdowns. We go one layer deeper and ask, What kind of arena would produce this victor? And what does that say about the capital's long-term strategy? That's why this video isn't just a character study of one clever tribute, it's a systems breakdown disguised as a story. We're using one hypothetical victor, the one who plays dumb, maps patterns, and never tips their hand, to reverse engineer the game maker's design habits, their blind spots, and the quiet promises they make to the districts to keep hope on life support. If you're the person who pauses the movie to read the scoreboard in the background, or rewinds to catch a single offhand line from Haymitch, you're in the right district. You're the audience that notices when the weather cycle resets every 4 hours, or when a mutt release always follows a lull in cannon fire. You don't just watch the games, you interrogate them. So if you want more of that, more overthinking Panem, more wait, what if that victor wasn't an accident, energy, hit subscribe and stay in the village with us. Because every comment here is fuel. You picture hidden victor who quietly broke the system? We'll build them an arena. You wonder whether District 4's village doubles as a recruitment center. That part matters because it might be our next deep dive. And keep those questions coming. The capital edits its broadcasts to hide tributes who understood the rulebook. We don't. In the next section, we'll start proving it by walking through exactly how one model victor could outplay the arena without anyone realizing until it's far too late. Inside the control room, how the game makers think they're winning. So if we don't edit the story, what happens when we step into the room where the story is written? You know the one I mean, the control room. At face value, it's the closest thing Panem has to a god's eye view of the games. Floor to ceiling, you've got the arena projected as a living map, every tree and rock tagged, every heartbeat pulsing as a tiny red light. Around it, rings of consoles, environmental dials for temperature, wind, and humidity. Touchscreens that can spin the sky from clear to storm in a second, and those infamous mutation panels, each one a neat little button that means absolute terror for someone's district. From in here, it looks as if every variable, every breath, belongs to the capital. But here's the real question. Is it actually chaos or choreography? The official narrative says the arena is wild, random, impossible to predict. That's the promise that keeps the audience hooked and the tributes terrified. Yet there is a lot to uncover here once you remember the games are television first and punishment second. Ratings don't thrive on true randomness, they thrive on schedule. So this is where we talk about design goals. The game makers need the arena to feel godlike to a tribute on the ground, but behind the glass, they're working with repeatable systems. Storm cycles that hit during peak viewing hours. Mutt releases that spike tension right before the nightly recap. Boundary responses that escalate from warning shocks to lethal force in a predictable ladder, so the narrative has a clear, you went too far beat. You see it in the cannons too. They rarely fire in a genuinely messy way. Bodies are discovered in time for hovercraft retrieval before the anthem, so the death montage can land cleanly. That means internal timing rules. If you're in the arena and you pay attention, you can start asking, how long after a scream does a cannon sound? How long after a cannon before the hovercraft arrives? Those patterns are a relationship chart between death and the control room. And it doesn't stop there. Time-based mutts, weather that loops in a 24 or 48-hour rhythm, force fields that react the same way every time you test them with a stone or a squirrel, tributes are meant to feel hunted by a mood. In reality, they're inside a machine. So why don't more victors break it? The Capital's answer is simple. They assume you can't. They assume you're too hungry, too exhausted, too busy not dying to notice the rulebook being written in the sky. That part matters because it's the game maker's biggest blind spot. They believe fear erases pattern recognition faster than any tracker-jacker swarm. Our hidden victor's entire strategy is built on proving that assumption wrong. While the careers swing swords for the cameras, this tribute is quietly timing cannon intervals with their own pulse, mapping wind shifts against the sun, and testing boundaries with disposable debris instead of their own body. On screen, they read as cautious, even dull. In the control room, no one flags them as a threat to the system. And that's the point. The safest tribute is the one the Capital thinks is playing the game straight. In the next section, we're going to cover how that model victor turns those quiet observations into actual moves, retouting mutts, dodging scheduled disasters, and walking out of a supposedly unbeatable arena having beaten the only opponents that really mattered. The arena's unbeatable illusion and its built-in flaws. So let's zoom in on the part the Capital never wants you to think about. If the arena is supposedly unbeatable, why do we keep seeing it glitch on camera? At face value, that shimmering blue curve of a force field is the ultimate promise. Step too far, and you die instantly. Simple, clean, terrifying. But here's the real question. If the boundary is so absolute, why do we have BT's wire catching on it, Johanna slamming her axe into it, and Katniss firing an arrow straight into the sky without the field vaporizing her on contact? The force field behaves selectively. Sometimes it repels, sometimes it rebounds, sometimes it kills. That part matters because it proves the coverage isn't one uniform wall of death. It's a patchwork of zones, tuned for spectacle. A tribute who's paying attention doesn't just accept "don't touch the edge" as a rule. They test it. Toss a rock here, a branch there. Watch where it bounces, where it burns, where it simply vanishes. You're not just checking for escape. You're mapping where the game makers had to compromise. Drainages, maintenance seams, blind corners where the field has to curve around something the broadcast never shows. This is where we talk about environmental scripting. The arena looks wild, but the storms in the quarter quell clock arena hit the same wedge every hour. The poison fog rolls on a loop. The jabberjays scream on schedule. Why? Because the Capital needs clarity for the audience. They need patterns the viewers can follow, so every district can place bets and feel smart. But any pattern the audience can follow, a tribute living inside it can weaponize. Think about the jungle arena. The tidal wave hits at a fixed time. The lightning tree strikes on cue. In an urban arena, mutts patrol in loops, turning the streets into a deadly train schedule. Our hypothetical model victor isn't just hiding from other tributes, they're quietly building a timetable of the games themselves. If you know the storm comes at 00 and the mutts sweep the plaza at 15, you suddenly have 45 minutes of relative safety the Capital never intended to grant you. And then there are the dead zones. Every broadcast has them. Angles the cameras never linger on. Patches of forest where nothing ever happens. Rooftop corners in urban arenas that always get cropped out. Why waste airtime on emptiness when you can show blood. The reason those areas are boring is because nothing scripted is set to happen there. No fire bursts, no mutt releases, no dramatic weather. For a tribute who wants to disappear, boring is code for unprogrammed. There is a lot to uncover here. Any system this complex, force fields, climate controls, mutt paths, camera grids, will have edge cases, glitches, overlaps where one script cancels out another. Our quiet victor wins by treating the arena not as a mystery, but as bad software. Nudge the edges, track the repeats, find the pockets where the game makers assumed no one would ever stand still long enough to notice. So what happens when a tribute not only finds those pockets, but survives in them long enough to start bending the game's schedule around their own? In the next section, we're going to cover what it looks like when the arena's unbeatable illusion starts working for the victor instead of the capital, and why that might be the one outcome the broadcast can never fully show you. Pattern Mapping 101. How a tribute turns chaos into a schedule. So how do you actually do that? How does a terrified tribute in the trees start turning this unbeatable arena into something that runs on a schedule you can plan around? This is where we talk about pattern mapping, not in the sci-fi sense, with graphs and monitors, but in the only toolkit you really have, your body, your memory, and whatever the arena gives you. You start by counting heartbeats between cannon blasts, breaths from sunrise to the first anthem. You watch where the sun climbs over that one crooked tree, where the shadows hit the rock ledge when the anthem cuts off. At face value, you look like you're just staring into space. In reality, you're building a clock. You mark things too, but never in a neat, game maker friendly way. A scratch on bark where the sun hits at midday. A broken twig near a stream where the fog rolls in right after the anthem. You repeat tiny phrases under your breath. 3 songs, then smoke, 2 shadows past the stump, then rain. Simple mnemonics that don't sound strategic if a mic picks them up. Under stress, your brain clings to rhythm. So you turn terror into a metronome, then you start logging mutts. Not on paper, obviously, but in a pattern of memory. Where did they come from? Was it always the same ridge, the same tunnel, the same patch of too still grass? What did you hear 10 seconds before, metal scraping the arena's fake birds cutting off mid-song, the air going strangely quiet? Did the smell change, chemical and sharp, right before the wolf mutts hit the cornucopia in the first games we see? Here's the real question. If you notice the same cue twice, do you treat it as coincidence or as a warning bell? To test that, you run experiments that don't look like experiments. You toss a pebble at suspicious ground and flinch dramatically when it sinks or sparks, so the control room reads it as a clumsy mistake, not data collection. You panic and shove a pack into a force field, then stagger back as if you didn't know it was there, while quietly counting how long it hums. You watch how the arena's animals behave. Do the insects avoid a certain pond? Do the birds never land on that one metal plate disguised as rock? That part matters because animals don't care about the capital's narrative. They only care about survival. The trick is to look unstrategic. You miss throws on purpose. You talk to yourself in a way that sounds more broken than calculating. You let the careers underestimate you because your tests read as fear, not method. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between performance and survival. But the short version is simple. The less of a threat you seem to the story, the more freedom you have to study the rules of the game. And once you've sketched even a rough schedule, the mutts that always cycle after dusk, the fog that rolls in on a 2-day loop, the lightning tree that strikes on cue, you can start doing something the capital never wants a tribute to do. You can choose to be in the right place at exactly the wrong time for everyone else. So what happens when a tribute stops just surviving that schedule and starts weaponizing it? In the next section, we're going to cover how a so-called model victor quietly turned those beats into traps, and why the capital had to pretend it was all brute luck. The art of playing dumb, staying below the control room radar. Weaponizing the schedule is one thing. Weaponizing the story the capital thinks you're in is another. On paper, the arena is about combat. Stronger tribute wins. Roll credits. But here's the real question. Why do the game makers obsess over training scores, interviews, and big moments instead of just who can swing a sword? Because they're not just running a death match. They're running a narrative economy. High-scoring tributes are investments. The capital pours screen-time sponsors and mutts into them to guarantee a satisfying climax. You see it with the careers every year. They dominate training, rack up kills, and instantly become the main characters of that games. That part matters because once you're framed as a protagonist, the control room stops treating you as a variable and starts treating you as a set piece. They'll engineer showdowns, tighten the arena around you, and if necessary, send in something catastrophic to make sure your arc ends on cue. So what happens to the tribute who doesn't fit the arc? The one who looks compliant, scared, maybe even a little clumsy? At face value, they're forgettable. The kind of kid the capital cuts away from to show a career polishing a spear. And that's exactly the point. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between fear and visibility. Tributes who read as background characters rarely get custom mutts or course correction lightning strikes. Why waste expensive spectacle on someone the audience barely remembers? This is where we talk about the art of playing dumb. Our hidden victor understands that the safest place in the arena is just outside the edit, so they miss obvious shots on purpose, letting an easy rabbit escape when a clean throw would prove they're dangerous. They overreact to minor hazards, screaming at a harmless rustle so the cameras catch a jumpy, incompetent kid, not a calculating threat. They visibly panic at safe moments, then go eerily calm when it actually matters. Once the lenses have already swung away. Notice how that ties into broadcast editing. The capital has no incentive to spotlight someone who seems boring, predictable, or chronically unlucky. A tribute who trips over roots, cries at night, and accidentally breaks their best weapon doesn't sell hope or drama, they sell background noise. So the editors cut around them. Meanwhile, that supposed dead weight can move through less monitored zones, test the force field with tossed pebbles, track cannon timing, and quietly map the arena's patterns without triggering any high-priority alerts. In other words, their first win isn't physical, it's editorial. By convincing the game makers they're not worth scripting around, this victor buys something no sponsor can send in a parachute. And once you've slipped below the control room radar, what can you do with all that unobserved space? In the next section, we're going to cover how our model victor used that invisibility to probe the arena's rulebook itself, and why the capital had to pretend they never noticed. Intel without suspicion, testing the rules of the game, So once you've slipped under the control room's radar, what do you actually do with that freedom? You don't make a speech to the sky. You start testing the walls of the maze the Capitol swears you can't see. At face value, a tribute hurling a spear that bounces off nothing is just bad aim. The audience laughs, the commentators blame nerves, and the game makers move on. But here's the real question. What if that bad throw was a controlled experiment? Our model Victor doesn't test the force field by walking into it. They throw sticks at different angles, low skids, high arcs, spinning blades, always from cover, always with a grimace that says, "Whoops." This is where we talk about bounce patterns. Does the spear ricochet straight back or slide off to the left every single time? Does an arrow vanish in midair in one direction but clatter to the ground in another? There is a lot to uncover here because every reaction tells you something about the geometry the Capitol is hiding. A tribute who can't throw 3 days in a row is either hopeless or quietly mapping the arena's invisible cage. But metal on force field is only one data stream. The arena is full of unpaid testers with wings, fur, and no contract. Why do the birds never cross that open stretch of sky near the lake? Why do the mutts, who will chase anything, slam to a halt at one patch of moss and circle away? If you're a careful tribute, you start treating animal behavior as a proxy for the rule book the Capitol won't hand you. You pretend you're just hungry. You follow a squirrel that always uses the same fallen log instead of the ground. You stumble into its path and watch where it refuses to go. That part matters because animals don't care about narrative. They care about survival. If 10 birds veer around an invisible line, you'd be a fool not to wonder why. Then there are the cannons. Everyone hears them. Almost no one times them. Our Victor does. How long between the kill and the boom? Is it instant in the open, but delayed when someone dies in heavy foliage? And the more unsettling pattern, are there bodies that never get a cannon at all? That's the moment you start to suspect off-screen manipulation, unreported deaths, or tributes quietly removed for Capitol reasons that have nothing to do with the games. So you start tripping near boundaries. You drop a pack into suspiciously still water and watch for sparks, bubbles, nothing. You take a wrong turn that just happens to run along the same ridge at different times of day, checking if the air hums, if your hair lifts, if the force field's power cycles. By day 3 or 4, a tribute who plays dumb but watches everything can understand the arena's real rules better than some junior game makers tapping the screens in the control room. The Capitol will never admit that, of course. But what happens when a victor doesn't just know the rules and starts quietly rewriting how they apply? Victors who won by being forgettable. So when a tribute starts quietly rewriting how the rules apply, you run into a strange problem. Sometimes the Capitol just edits them out of the story. Not every victor is a Katniss or a Finnick. Most of them, you barely remember their names. A sentence in the training recap. A quick shot on the victory tour balcony. Then gone. At face value, that sounds normal. Not every games can be a fireball-filled revolution audition. But here's the real question. How do you get an uneventful Hunger Games in a system that exists to be televised chaos? There is a lot to uncover here because the canon keeps dropping hints that some years are unremarkable. Fewer mutts, fewer dramatic twists, commentators brushing past whole days with a vague, nothing much happened in the arena. In a show built on blood and spectacle, nothing much happened is practically a confession. It means either the game makers got lazy, which we know they don't, or someone won in a way the Capitol doesn't really want you thinking about. This is where we talk about the forgettable victors, the ones who don't rack up a legendary body count, don't form arena-shaking alliances, don't pull a star-crossed lovers act on camera. Instead, they minimize kills, avoid big confrontations, and let the arena do most of the work. Food shortages, exposure, mutts aimed at louder targets. On screen, that reads as passive. Off screen, it's highly calculated. Imagine a tribute who deliberately underperforms in training to earn a low score, then uses that invisibility to move freely while careers chase the 8s and 9s. Or the kid who always arrives at the cornucopia 10 minutes after a bloodbath, scavenging the edges, never giving the cameras a clean, heroic shot. The Capitol calls them cowards, but the reason they survive is that they understand the relationship between narrative threat and actual threat. The more boring you look, the less the control room feels the need to correct you. Historically, some victors win by minimizing that narrative threat to Capitol control, not by maximizing kills. A quiet tribute who maps MUT release times, tracks cannon timing, and predicts weather cycles is dismantling the games as surely as someone blowing up a force field. The difference is, they don't announce it. They don't taunt the sky. They simply step aside a minute before the lightning hits the careers camp and let physics do the killing. Pattern interrupt. Everyone remembers the tributes who broke the rules on camera. But what about the ones who broke the games without anyone noticing? If the Capitol can retroactively edit broadcasts, cut suspicious moments, and write the victor's interview as lucky, tragic, humble, how many so-called boring winners are actually the sharpest minds Panem ever produced? And here's the real question the Capitol never once asked. How dangerous is a victor who's already proven they can outthink the arena precisely because no one realized what they'd done? The low-score gambit, weaponizing the training center. So if the most dangerous victor is the one nobody noticed, you have to ask, where does that invisibility actually start? Not in the arena. It starts in the training center. At face value, the training center is just a skills buffet. You wander from station to station, you learn snares, knots, hand to hand, fire starting. But here's the real question. What is the Capitol actually doing with those 3 days? They're not just teaching you, they're sorting you. Threats, underdogs, comic relief. The score you get isn't just a number, it's your assigned role in the game's narrative. This is where we talk about the low score gambit. Because once you understand that the training center is a casting call, you realize there is a lot to uncover here about why you might not want the lead role. If careers are performing for an 11, our hidden victor is auditioning for a 3 on purpose. How do you tank your own score without looking suspicious? You miss the obvious targets, not the impossible ones. You fumble with a spear, avoid the complex weapons rack entirely, and let yourself look overwhelmed by something as basic as water purification. You pick up a knife, grip it wrong, then accidentally drop it point first into the floor 2 feet away. Enough competence to survive the day, not enough to trend on Capitol feeds. That part matters because the game makers aren't just rewarding raw ability, they're calibrating the hunt. High scores pull attention. They attract ambitious tributes who want prestige kills, and they attract game maker interventions designed to test promising contenders. Low scores? Those usually get filed under background noise. Safe to ignore. Safe to let wander. And that invisibility has very practical advantages. On day one, fewer tributes are scanning the cornucopia for your face. Career packs are busy tracking 10s and 11s, not the kid who couldn't light a fire in training. The control room is less tempted to drop a mutation on your head just to keep the broadcast exciting. Sponsors, their low expectations quietly free you from having to perform for the cameras every waking second. We're going to cover one research example here because it shows the relationship between score and survival perfectly. A tribute from a mid-tier district deliberately underperformed, landed a 4, and vanished from capital discourse overnight. In the arena, while the top scorers were pushed toward flashy showdowns, MUT releases and random hazards kept coincidentally clustering around their routes. Our low-scored tribute moved through the gaps those disasters created, mapping cannon timing, watching how the arena walls responded, and never once drawing a custom disaster. Everyone remembered the bloodbath at the lake. No one remembered the quiet figure who was never worth targeting. By the time the field had thinned, the game makers realized their mistake, but by then our tribute had already decoded water cycles, MUT patrol paths, and safe zones. The games looked brutal. Their path through it looked lucky. And that's the point. Our Hidden Victors games started days before the arena, in that fluorescent training center, by hacking the capital's expectations and stepping into a role so small the cameras almost forgot to follow. Arena as algorithm, predicting the next random disaster. If the training center was our tribute's classroom, the arena is their exam. Rigged, curved, and graded on spectacle. At face value, the arena looks chaotic. Firestorms here, MUTs there, tidal waves when the ratings dip. But here's the real question. How random can anything be when a room full of game makers has a schedule, a budget, and a producer breathing down their necks about viewership? The arena isn't wilderness. It's an algorithm. We're going to cover how that algorithm works, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The capital doesn't just want death, it wants pacing. Think about the pattern. Early on, you get the bloodbath at the cornucopia. That's your cold open. Then, mid-game, when things slow and sponsors get bored, you suddenly see engineered thinning events. Fires flushing tributes together, poison fog, shrinking safe zones. Finally, in the late game, the arena itself forces confrontation, drained water sources, converging MUTs, sudden storms that drive everyone to one landmark. Different arenas, same rhythm. That part matters because a tribute who understands television can predict violence better than a tribute who understands trees. Our victor watches not just the sky, but the story. If there's been a long stretch of quiet, no cannons, no hovercraft, no screams carrying over the tree line, that's not mercy. That's a ticking clock. Somewhere in the control room, a game maker is being asked why the ratings dipped in the last half hour. So how do you read an algorithm you can't see? You start with micro signals, small temperature spikes before a fire line ignites. The air goes sharp, chemical, and the birds vanish. Wind patterns shifting in a neat, circular way before a storm, instead of building naturally from a single direction. Unnatural silence, not just forest at night quiet, but every insect, every frog, every mutt prototype pulled back at once. That's the sound of a system rebooting. There is a lot to uncover here because those signals repeat. Game makers rely on predictable cycles, mutts released on the hour, boundary shocks that escalate in strength every few minutes, rain that never lasts past a certain time because cameras fog up. Our tribute starts timing cannon blasts against the sun's position, counting seconds between force field hums, watching how long it takes for a hovercraft to retrieve a body from different quadrants. They're not just surviving the environment, they're reverse engineering its code. And once you internalize that rhythm, this is where we talk about weaponizing it. If you know a mid-game disaster is overdue, you don't camp in the pretty meadow the capital keeps cutting to. You skirt the edges, you move just outside the obvious kill zone, near higher ground, near cover, near an exit path. Let the fire drive your enemies toward each other. Let the mutt wave sweep through the valley you left 10 minutes ago. You're not dodging randomness, you're stepping between pre-scheduled commercials. So what happens when a tribute stops being content with predicting the next random disaster and starts quietly scheduling one of their own? The safe zone exploit, finding the arena's blind corner. Sometimes the smartest move in the arena isn't to run faster, it's to find the one place where you don't have to run at all. Remember that research example we touched on earlier? The tribute who edges up to the shimmering boundary, braces for impact, and nothing happens. No blast, no rebound, just a faint hum and the realization that this particular slice of force field is non-lethal. At face value, it looks like a lucky glitch. A funny moment for the capital highlight reel. But here's the real question. Why would a supposedly perfect death box have a soft spot in the first place? This is where we talk about construction. Arenas are rushed builds. New quells, new themes, last minute, wouldn't it be fun if the trees bled acid? Notes from some junior game maker who wants a promotion. You've got uneven rock faces, sinkholes, old mine shafts under the soil. Every time they bolt a force field panel into that mess, there's a chance the coverage overlaps weirdly or leaves a dead patch. Then add emergency modifications when a previous mutt release goes wrong, or a storm effect shorts out a section. Suddenly the unbeatable system has a seam. So how does a tribute find it without announcing on camera that they found it? You don't sprint into the wall screaming about freedom. You play dumb, you trip near the edge more than once, brushing your pack or a branch against it. You throw pebbles, then bigger rocks, then maybe a broken spear shaft, and you watch. Where does it spark, and where does it just absorb? You notice that wild mutts who will happily charge through fire never cross an invisible line in the sand. You clock that. When a tribute is chased in that direction, the game makers always steer them away with a sudden hazard. There is a lot to uncover here if you're patient enough to map reactions instead of just surviving them. And if you're really careful, you do it while looking terrified, not calculating. Low training score, unremarkable kills, no big speeches. The capital reads you as background. That part matters because tributes who seem too clever about the arena tend to have accidents. Once you've confirmed that blind corner, its value is absurd. You've essentially stepped half a meter outside the games, a patch where mutts won't follow, where the force field won't fry you, and where the cameras for some mysterious technical reason. Never linger. You can sleep more than 20 minutes. You can clean wounds without worrying about a surprise tidal wave. You can stash food and water in a place no one else can approach without getting blasted. So why hunt every day when you can let the arena do it for you? Our hidden victor could anchor their entire mid-game there, timing raids for supplies between mutt cycles, slipping back into the blind spot while the audience focuses on louder tributes. On the broadcast, they're the quiet survivor who got lucky. In reality, they've stepped outside the script, and the Capitol never even notices the rewrite. The real danger only appears later, when a victor who's lived through that starts asking whether the next arena has seams too, and whether a whole district could learn to slip through them. Killing without killing, letting the arena do the work. So if you've slipped through the seams once, what do you do the next time the Capitol throws you into a killing box? You don't just dodge blades. You dodge the story of being a killer. This is where we talk about killing without killing. On paper, every tribute is supposed to prove their worth through visible aggression. At face value, that's the whole promise of the games. May the best killer win. But here's the real question. What if the most lethal move you can make is choosing not to attack and letting the arena do it for you? Tactical aggression is what the careers are raised on. You see a target, you move in, you take the kill because it looks powerful on camera and reassures your district that volunteering was worth it. Strategic passivity is the opposite. You track, you measure, you wait. You only move when the arena itself can finish the job. One path feeds the Capitol's narrative. The other quietly rewrites it. Think about luring a career pack toward a canyon where you've already seen mutts emerge on a time-based cycle. You don't need to swing first. You just need to appear in the tree line, let them spot you, and vanish back across the safe line 30 seconds before those mutts release. From the broadcast angle, it's chaos. From your angle, it's subtraction by scheduling. Or you learn which patches of ground trigger floods, poisonous fog, or those neat little course corrections the game makers love. You leave a trail of broken branches, a dropped pack, maybe even a smear of blood you saved from an earlier wound. You're not hunting tributes, you're steering them into the arena's own teeth. There is a lot to uncover here, because every hazard has a pattern, and patterns are a different kind of weapon. That part matters, because the Capitol counts kills. They replay them, rank them, turn them into trading cards and victory tour speeches. A tribute with a high on-screen body count reads as dangerous. Long after the arena, they're harder to put on talk shows, harder to sell as a harmless mentor in a neat little house at the edge of their district. But if the cannons keep sounding and you're never clearly shown delivering the final blow, suddenly you're the survivor who just outlasted everyone else. The edit leans into weather, mutts, bad luck. You become proof that the games themselves are unstoppable, not that an individual victor can outthink the system. Canon already hints this happened. Not every name on that list of victors was a Katniss or a Finnick. Some of them almost certainly spent most of their arena time hiding in rock crevices, mapping force fields with tossed pebbles, and watching other tributes stumble into traps. They didn't beat 12 opponents. They beat dehydration, infection, and a production schedule. And from the Capitol's perspective, that raises a quieter, sharper question. Is the tribute who never seems to kill anyone really the safest victor to crown, or the hardest one to read? If you can't track their choices in the arena, How do you predict what they'll do once they're installed in Victor's village with a direct line to a restless district? Because the moment a Victor proves they can turn an arena against its makers, you have to wonder what happens when they start treating the capital itself the same way. When the control room notices you, surviving course corrections. So what happens in the moment the control room stops treating you as background noise and starts treating you as a problem? Not when you break the arena, but when they suspect you might. This is where we talk about course corrections. At face value, a wall of fire or a sudden pack of mutts is just spectacle. The games need danger, right? But here's the real question. Why does the fire only ever seem to sweep through the patch of woods where the Alliance has been too quiet? Why do the wolf mutts appear the exact night a tribute finally finds a safe overhang to sleep on? There is a lot to uncover here, because those disasters aren't random. They're etits. Course corrections are the game makers grabbing the narrative wheel, sudden forest fires to flush you out, floods to break up a camp, terrain plates grinding apart conveniently between you and the one ally who actually respects you. Even shortages count. The sponsor gifts that never arrive, the water source that mysteriously dries up right after you've been there 3 days in a row. The reason is simple. Safety is bad television, and a tribute who treats the arena like a logic puzzle instead of a death match threatens the entire promise of the games. So how do you know when the control room is watching you specifically, not just spinning the hazard wheel for the whole map? You start to see patterns. The fog doesn't just roll in, it rolls in behind you. Mutts don't patrol, they trail your path with a 10-minute delay, nudging you away from the cliff edge or toward another tribute they want you to meet. Your favorite ridge keeps getting hit with random lightning. Your carefully mapped loop around the cornucopia suddenly sprouts sinkholes on the exact hours you usually pass through. Here's the real question. If they're adjusting to you, can you adjust back without tipping your hand? We're going to cover the simplest counter strategy first. Don't be where you make sense. Rotate hideouts before they become patterns. Sleep one night in the trees, one in a cave, one under open sky you pretend to hate. If they can't model you, they can't efficiently punish you. Second, occasionally act reckless. Not suicidally brave, but noisy. Chase a fight you could have avoided. Sprint into the bloodbath for something trivial, then retreat. That part matters because it resets expectations. You stop reading as a chess player and start reading as another scared tribute making bad decisions on adrenaline. The capital is comfortable with fear. It understands fear. And whenever possible, let someone else be more interesting. If another tribute is setting fires, screaming at the sky, or making speeches at the cameras, let them. The relationship between threat and attention is brutally direct. A tribute who quietly maps much release times while pretending to panic at every cannon is far safer than the one who announces their cleverness. This is where plausible deniability becomes a survival tool. If your movements could be coincidence, if your retreats could be read as simple terror, the control room has no clean proof you're gaming their system. Historically, those are the victors the capital later calls lucky. Luck is just strategy the audience wasn't trained to see. But what happens if you're too good at this? If you walk out crowned a model victor, your district cheering, the capital satisfied. And only then do they realize you'd been rewriting their games from the inside the whole time. That's where the arena ends, and the real course correction begins. The broadcast we never saw, how the Capitol edits out genius. And here's where the Capitol quietly flips the board. Because everything we've been talking about, the pattern mapping, the boundary testing, the way a tribute can treat the arena as a system instead of a nightmare jungle, none of that matters if no one ever sees it. The arena ends, the victor is crowned, and then the real games begin in the editing room. At face value, you think you've seen the Hunger Games. Wall-to-wall coverage, multiple angles, Caesar Flickerman narrating every twist. But here's the real question. Who's deciding which moments make it onto those giant district screens? The answer is simple and terrifying. The Capitol does. Completely. Every feed from every tree, every tunnel, every hidden camera passes through a control room before it ever becomes a story. There is a lot to uncover here, because that part matters more than any mutation. The Capitol doesn't just cut for time, they cut for ideology. What gets trimmed first? Anything that hints the arena can be understood? A tribute throwing rocks at an invisible wall to test a force field? Gone. Two kids whispering about how the cannons always fire in fours at dusk, cropped to a reaction shot and some tragic music. This is where we talk about pattern recognition as contraband. You're not supposed to see a District 12 girl mapping the timing of rainstorms, or a quiet boy from 3 tracking how long it takes for a fallen tree to be cleared by hovercraft. You're supposed to believe the arena is pure chaos, controlled only by the divine hand of the game makers. If a tribute starts openly discussing how the arena works, the audio mysteriously fails. Or the camera cuts to a more acceptable story: grief, rage, a career sharpening a sword. And it doesn't stop live. The real research says the Capitol retroactively edits the games, even in the recap reels. They scrub out the moments where someone clearly understands the rulebook. The tribute who underperformed in training scored a 3, then used that invisibility to cross a supposedly lethal boundary. In the official footage, the barrier just malfunctions. A lucky break, a miracle, certainly not a system being quietly reverse engineered by a scared 17-year-old. So how do you hide an entire brain? You reframe it. How a hidden victor's games would be recut into a highlight reel of accidents and emotions. The careful testing of force fields becomes a tragic misstep. The deliberate choice to trigger mutts early to drain the arena, rebranded as a panic attack. Every intentional move is narrated as instinct, coincidence, or sheer capital-blessed fortune. And here's the twist. The absence of obvious cleverness in the official record might be the strongest evidence that cleverness was there. Why would a regime obsessed with control ever broadcast proof that their perfect arena can be solved? They wouldn't. Which raises a darker question. If the only version of your victory that survives is the one where you look harmless, what does the Capitol do with the version where you don't? We're going to cover what happens when that hidden footage becomes a weapon in the next section. Case File A. The low-score ghost of a jungle arena. So let's open a case file the Capitol never aired. Everyone remembers the flashy arenas, the spinning cornucopias, the fireballs. But here's the real question. What happens when a tribute doesn't fight the arena at all and just quietly solves it? Picture a Jungle Games. Not the neat clock of the quarter quell, but something messier. Dense canopy that swallows the sun. Vines hanging in curtains. Visibility so bad the cameras have to guess where you are. From the Capitol's perspective, it's perfect. Humidity mutts and 100 places to die off screen. From one tribute's perspective, it's cover. On paper, this boy from a mid-tier district is nothing. Training score 4. No career pack invitation. No tragic backstory pushed in interviews. At face value, he's the kind of tribute even his own mentor mentally files under. Maybe we get a sponsor if he cries. That part matters because the game makers are watching the same numbers you are. High scores get firestorms. Low scores get ignored. This is where we talk about playing dumb as a survival strategy. In training, he misses throws by just enough. He listens more than he talks. He asks the plant specialist an innocent question about which ones not to touch, then memorizes the answer. The Capitol reads that as fear. What he's actually doing is building a mental library before the arena even loads. When the gong sounds, he doesn't sprint for the cornucopia. He jogs, arrives late to the bloodbath by design, when the real weapons are gone and the cameras are locked on better stories. He grabs a half-empty pack, a canteen, and vanishes into green. No dramatic music, no slow-motion kill, just absence. Once the noise fades, he starts mapping, why do the monkey mutts pass every 40 minutes, not 35? Why does the artificial thunder always start in the west? Why do the birds go silent 10 seconds before a cannon? There is a lot to uncover here, and he treats every pattern as a rule in an invisible handbook. He climbs, not high enough to be a silhouette, just high enough to see where the fog pools, where the ground sinks, where the random lightning never hits. Animal trails become his highways. If the Capitol wants to keep the native creatures alive for ambience, those paths have to skirt the worst traps. That's the relationship he's exploiting, the game maker's need for spectacle versus their need for stability. Storm announcement? He's already in a root tangle cave he scouted 3 days ago. Poison fog rolling in. He watched its edge yesterday from a tree and knows exactly how fast it travels. Every major event, he's just off screen, 1 ridge over, 1 minute early. To the audience, he barely exists. To the control room, he never triggers enough alarms to justify a course correction. And the final careers stumble into a mutt nest and tear each other apart. He doesn't deliver a killing blow. He survives it. Last cannon fires, hovercraft descends, and the Capitol brands him a quiet lucky victor, a reminder that even nobodies can win if they have hope. But the reason he walked out is simple. He reverse-engineered their jungle. He understood the game's algorithm better than the people paid to run it, and because acknowledging that would shatter the promise of an unbeatable arena, the Capitol edits it into a fluke. The question we have to ask next is what happens when a victor who solved the system is dropped into a very real, very unscripted rebellion. Case File B, the Urban Glitch Hunter. And that brings us to the victor the Capitol really hates talking about, because everyone remembers the jungle genius who mapped the clock. But here's the real question. What happens when you drop that same kind of brain into an arena that's supposed to feel real, messy, unscripted, and they still find the pattern? Crumbling high-rises with their windows punched out, street grids that look chaotic on camera, alleys zigzagging, overpasses collapsing, sewer grates steaming. At face value it screams, no rules, pure chaos. But if you pull back, you'd see what our tribute sees, a neat rectangle of streets, sewer lines that all bend at the same impossible angle, and a skyline that never quite changes no matter how far you run. Our tribute isn't a career, mid-range training score from a mid-tier district that sends ore and concrete instead of pretty things. Back home, they were the kid who followed their parent through half-finished foundations, the one who could tell when a wall was load-bearing just by tapping it. That part matters because construction teaches you a brutal truth. If something stands, it obeys rules, even when it's pretending not to. So while the careers are grandstanding in the plazas, this tribute is doing something much more dangerous. They're counting steps between intersections, measuring how long it takes for the random acid rain to start after the anthem, tossing pebbles at brickwork, and hearing the hollow thud that means force field, not stone. There is a lot to uncover here, and they know it. That's when they find it. A narrow stairwell in a half-collapsed office block that on the map in their head should open into a perfect kill zone. 3 sniper sight lines, nowhere to run. Instead, it dead ends into nothing. A blank grey shimmer, a non-lethal force field patch that hums but doesn't shock, sitting in a tiny camera blind spot where 2 surveillance grids don't quite overlap. Most tributes would back away. Our tribute moves in, tests it, sleeps there one night. No mutts, no course correction fireballs, no lightning, just silence. This is where we talk about weaponized invisibility. They turn it into a base. Food scavenged from abandoned markets gets cached under loose tiles. They stage decoy camps in other buildings, half-burned bedrolls, fake blood, a stolen jacket nailed to a wall, to lure careers into ambushes. Then they melt back through their glitch stairwell, hit and run, always vanishing into the 1 square meter the game makers can't fully touch without admitting they messed up. On screen, the Capitol edits it into a grit story, a quiet underdog, surviving on perseverance, darting through alleys, refusing to give up hope. The relationship between tribute and arena is rewritten. No mention of the dead zone, no hint they've been living in the blind spot of the games themselves. So what happens when a victor knows the arena can break? What does that do to the promise of an all-powerful capital once they're back in a real city that's cracking at the edges too? Case File C, the clock watcher of a frozen arena. So if one victor can live in the blind spot of the arena, what happens when another learns to read the arena the way the game makers do? Not emotionally. Mathematically, Case File C is a winter arena, not the pretty kind. You're dropped into a frozen bowl where the snow never fully settles because the wind keeps tearing it sideways. Blizzards roll in so fast the cameras lose you for minutes at a time. The lakes are a sheet of glass over black water, the ice thin enough that a wrong step is a death sentence. Shelter exists, technically splintered cabins, rock overhangs, but most of them funnel wind instead of blocking it. In this arena, exposure kills faster than another tribute's spear. And our tribute, at face value, they're forgettable. Average height, average build, from a middle-tier district that doesn't produce careers or total underdogs. The kind of tribute the Capitol edits into reaction shots, not highlight reels. But here's the real question. What happens when the average tribute is the only one counting? From the first gong, they're measuring 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way to 300 before the first engineered gust hits the cornucopia. They track the sun's crawl across that washed-out winter sky, noting when the light starts to blue, when the shadows sharpen, when the fake stars flick on a beat too early. There is a lot to uncover here. They're not just surviving, they're doing field research under live fire. The breakthrough comes on day 2, when the second blizzard slams the arena. Our tribute is already wedged under a rock shelf, having sprinted there exactly 30 seconds before the first flake. Coincidence once. Pattern twice. By the third storm they know. Roughly every 6 hours the whiteout returns. Temperature spikes a little before, drops hard after. Certain zones, those shallow valleys near the cracked pines, thaw for maybe 40 minutes in the in-between. This is where we talk about mutts. The capital releases them in waves, but not randomly. Our tribute notices the paw prints only ever crossed over on the lee side of the frozen river during the night cycle. No tracks during the thaw windows, no howls during blizzards. The mutts patrol on a schedule, so they build a schedule too. They move only in those brief safe bands between storm and patrol. Cache food and stolen blankets in hollow logs and under ice ledges, turning the arena into a circuit of pre-stocked checkpoints. When they need water, they wait for the predictable thaw, punch through slush in the same 3 places, then vanish before the next temperature crash. And confrontations? They weaponize the weather. They bait a stronger tribute out onto the lake minutes before a scheduled blizzard, then retreat to solid ground, counting down until the wind erases sightlines and turns footing into a death trap. They don't have to win every fight. They just have to be on the right side of the cycle when the arena attacks for them. To the capital audience, it plays as incredible instinct, a humble victor with a mysterious sense for danger. That part matters because it preserves the promise that the games are still unknowable, still controlled. But somewhere in the control room, a game maker is staring at the movement logs and realizing this tribute hasn't just survived the arena. They've reverse engineered the schedule and walked out proving the games run on rules a human mind can crack. Why the capital fears smart winners more than bloody ones. And that's where the capital's real nightmare starts. Because there are 2 kinds of victors they can work with. And this tribute, they're neither in the way the system expects. On one side, you have the crowd-pleasing killer, the career from 1 or 2 who racks up a high body count, plays to the cameras and dies or wins in a blaze of spectacle. At face value, that's terrifying for the districts. You're a kid in 10 watching a 17-year-old turn the arena into a slaughterhouse, and you think there is no hope against that. But here's the real question. Terrifying for who? The bloody victor is scary in the exact way the capital wants. They prove the games work. Violence in, violence out. The strong survive, the weak die, and the audience at home in the capital can relax into the story they've been sold. The system is brutal, yes, but it's fair in its own twisted way. Order is maintained. There is a lot to uncover here about why Snow actually prefers that kind of winner. Because the other type, the quiet strategist who walks out with almost no blood on their hands but a suspiciously clean record with the mutts and the weather patterns, that part matters because they don't reinforce the myth of omnipotence. They puncture it. This is where we talk about political danger. The first victor makes the arena seem unbeatable unless you're a born killer. The second shows it can be gamed. If one tribute can map the canon timing, track mutt release schedules, test the force field with pebbles instead of bodies, and survive by understanding the rulebook, then suddenly the games shift genres. They stop being divine punishment and start becoming a puzzle. And puzzles invite participation. You start asking why. Why did the fog always roll in at the same hour? Why did the jabberjays never cross that one ravine? Why did that lucky victor always sleep under the same tree just outside the range of the nightly firestorm? The capital can edit the broadcast, but the districts still trade stories, still build patterns out of rumor. Snow's core fear isn't rebellion as spectacle. He can work with spectacle. He literally televises it. His real fear is rebellion as knowledge. People learning where the pressure points are, which levers move food shipments, which peacekeepers can be bribed, which power lines stay on even when the fence is down for repairs. A smart victor who has already reverse-engineered one capital system is proof that others can be cracked. So what do you do with a victor who's too smart to be safe but too clean to punish openly? You can't disappear them without raising questions. You can't celebrate them too loudly without inviting imitation. We're going to cover how the capital threads that needle next, by turning that dangerous brain into a brand and hoping the costume is tight enough to hold the rebellion in. Hope versus fear inside the arena, the political logic of beatable systems. So here's the problem with turning a too smart tribute into a brand. They've already seen how the sausage gets made. This is where we talk about Snow's favorite recipe: fear on the outside, hope on the inside. You remember that scene with Seneca Crane on the balcony? Snow walks him through it so gently it almost sounds reasonable. Fear keeps people in line, he says, but fear alone isn't stable. Give them nothing but terror, and eventually they stop playing. They stop volunteering. They stop believing the games are anything but a death sentence. So why does he add that one extra ingredient? Hope. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. At face value, it's a throwaway villain line. But here's the real question. How do you build an arena that physically embodies that sentence? Why does the design of the games have to sell you on the promise that technically you could win? Look at how the game makers construct their playgrounds. The arenas are lethal, yes, but they're not pure chaos. There are patterns, mutts dropped on a schedule, weather cycling on a loop, force fields that always respond the same way when you throw a rock. That part matters because it means the games are a system, a rigged one, but still a system you can study, map, maybe even beat if you're clever enough. And that's the political logic. The games have to look unwinnable enough to terrify every district parent, but beatable enough that a career from one or two can stand there and say, if I train hard, if I get sponsors, I can make it. Volunteering only makes sense if you believe the arena is hard mode, not instant death. Sponsorship only makes sense if viewers believe their gifts can actually tip the balance. No hope, no ratings, no control. The existence of victors is the hope mechanism. Victor's Village, the parades, the interviews, those are all proof of concept. See, if you're strong, or beautiful, or charming, or you play the star-crossed lover just right, you can escape your district's fate. There is a lot to uncover here in that relationship between individual exception and collective despair. One person gets out, and the other thousands keep working because maybe, someday, it could be them. Our hidden victor is the nightmare version of that promise. They don't just beat other tributes. They quietly beat the system the capital is selling. They're the tribute who notices the mutt spawn every 4 hours on the dot and uses that to cross open ground. Who tests the boundary with a stick and realizes where the force field bends? Who plays dumb in training to earn a low score, then uses that invisibility to move freely while the cameras chase bigger stories? Snow can celebrate a pretty face with a tragic backstory. He cannot celebrate someone who reverse engineered his machine. Because once you prove the arena is a solvable puzzle, you expose the trick. The games stop being divine judgment and start looking programmable. If one tribute can treat the arena as code to be cracked, what happens when a whole district starts thinking that way about the capital itself? That's the crack our hidden victor represents. Not just a person who survived, but a person who quietly demonstrated the games are beatable on terms the capital can't air. And the real danger is what happens if that knowledge doesn't stay hidden. Which raises the next question: how do you keep a victor who's seen the code from ever teaching anyone else how to read it? Life after the arena. The quiet punishments of a too clever victor. You win the games, you get the script. Parades, interviews, a gleaming train back to your district and a key to your new house in Victor's village. At face value, it's the fairy tale ending. No more reaping for your family, hot water on demand, a pantry that never empties, and children in your district pointing at your windows as proof that the capital keeps its promise. You were chosen, you survived, and now you're rewarded. But here's the real question. What happens when the capital knows you didn't just survive the arena, you solved it? For a standard victor, the narrative is already tightly controlled. You do your victory tour, you answer Caesar's soft questions, you mentor, you show up when the capital calls. The relationship is transactional but clear. You play the role of hope, they let you keep your quiet luxury. Our too clever victor gets a different version of that script. Same house, same parade, same smile on the balcony. But the peacekeepers on the edge of Victor's village, there are more of them. The direct phone line to the capital, it rings more often, and you don't ignore those calls. Your appearances are more scripted, your interviews full of pre-approved anecdotes that carefully avoid the moments where you mapped the arena's mutt release cycles or tested the force field with rocks. This is where we talk about surveillance as reward. You're not thrown in a cell, you're given a garden and then told exactly which paths you're allowed to walk. You want to visit the Hob equivalent in your district. Suddenly, there's a schedule. You used to slip into the back of the bakery, now a helpful escort comes along. Even in your own living room, you can't be sure which camera is for security and which is for study. And the testing never stops. You're invited back on Capital broadcasts and asked leading questions about the games. Wasn't the arena perfectly fair? Didn't the game makers design such a beautiful challenge? You know the right answers. You also know why they're asking. Then come the bribes. A special capital doctor for your nightmares, extra shipments of coffee or medicine for your district, maybe a private train car to bring in a friend. That part matters because every comfort is also a contract. We gave you this, so you'll keep our version of the story. Meanwhile, your public persona is being quietly edited. There is a lot to uncover here. Your official memoir, ghost-written, full of heartfelt reflections on courage, suspiciously light on the part where you reverse-engineered the arena's weather cycle. Your charity work is staged. You hand out blankets, you visit schools, you say things a truly strategic victor would never say without prompting. On paper, you weren't a code breaker, you were just brave. And the real punishment isn't a whip or a cell. It's epistemic. You walk around knowing the system is vulnerable, having seen the seams yourself, and yet every day you are forced to perform a world where the capital is unbreakable. You know why the games can be beaten, but you have to stand on camera and sell the myth that they can't. So what does that do to a person? And how long can the capital trust that pressure not to crack? We're going to cover that next, when the performance finally starts to slip. The victor who could have ended the games early. So what happens when that pressure does crack, but silently? Not with a berry stunt on live TV, but with a smile, a bow, and a perfect capital-approved victory edit. Everyone remembers the tributes who defied the games in public. But here's the real question. What about the victor who broke the system in private, then went home to Victor's village and started teaching other kids how to do it too? This is where we talk about the mentor who treats the arena as homework. Imagine a victor in some mid-tier district, officially a model citizen, unofficially running a one-person resistance school out of their kitchen. They don't say, rebel, they say, notice. Notice how mutts appear on a schedule. Notice how the cannons cluster at certain hours. Notice how the rain never falls on the same quadrant twice in a row. On paper, they're doing what the capital expects, prepping tributes, raising the odds of a win, keeping that promise of hope alive. But there is a lot to uncover here, because what they're really teaching is pattern recognition and rule testing without getting flagged. Toss a rock at the tree line to see if it hits a force field. Track when the anthem cuts off early. Pretend you're scared while you're actually mapping the arena's operating system. At face value, a detail like mutts follow schedules sounds small. It's trivia, something for late-night capital talk shows. But that part matters because once tribute survives by predicting those cycles, that story doesn't stay in the capital. It goes home on the train. It leaks through black market traders, drunk peacekeepers, traveling merchants. Suddenly, in 3 different districts, you have kids whispering that the boundaries sometimes glitch at dawn, or that the fog never crosses the river twice. Why does that scare the capital more than a flashy on-screen outburst? Because it reframes the relationship between tribute and arena. The arena stops being a divine punishment and starts being tech-followable, testable, hackable. And you don't need a speech to spread that. You just need one victor quietly repeating, year after year, the games are rules. Rules can be learned, but here's the risk calculus. Share too much, and you don't just slip, you disappear. An unfortunate accident. A sudden reassignment to the capital where no one ever sees you again. Share too little, and you help polish the very machine you know how to jam. So how do you decide which secrets to hand to a terrified 14-year-old and which to bury with you? Here's the real question. Is rebellion only real when the capital can see it? Or is the truest rebellion the secret act that permanently weakens the games from the inside? One untelevised choice at a time. So instead of staying in theory, what if we test it? What if we walk through one full Hunger Games where a tribute actually runs this playbook, outsmarts the Gamemakers, exploits every pattern your mentor hinted at, and still walks out crowned a perfect, obedient victor? Because in the next section, we're going to cover that arena. And once you see how they win, you may not watch any other games the same way again. Designing the perfect arena for a secret mastermind. So if we're going to cover one full Hunger Games where a tribute quietly breaks the system, we need the right stage. Because not every arena is equally friendly to a secret mastermind. At face value, the Capitol wants every arena to feel unbeatable. But here's the real question. Which designs accidentally hand the smartest tribute a blueprint? Think about a clock arena first. Time-based wedges, rotating horrors, mutts on a schedule. For a clever tribute, that's a gift. You can map patterns, predict when the lightning hits, and weaponize the schedule against other tributes. The flaw is the very thing that makes it impressive on TV. It has to be consistent enough for the audience to follow. Then you have a pure jungle. Dense cover, poisonous plants, confusing soundscapes. The game makers assume it's chaos, but nature has rules. Animal paths reveal safe zones, weather cycles hint at artificial boundaries, and any glitch in the ecosystem, a bird that never lands on a certain tree, betrays where the tech is hiding. There is a lot to uncover here if you're patient, and you watch more than you run. Fewer places to hide, but more physics to exploit. Ice cracks along stress lines, snow records footprints, and temperature shifts expose vents and maintenance seams. A tribute who understands cause and effect can turn every frozen lake into a minefield the control room didn't intend. Urban arenas, though, are something else. Buildings, sewers, power grids, cameras. The more infrastructure you add, the more chances for bugs, blind spots, and unintended shortcuts. That part matters because the games have to look modern and controlled for the Capitol audience, which means layering tech on top of nature until something gives. We're going to cover a hybrid jungle-urban arena. Imagine overgrown high-rises, collapsed sky bridges wrapped in vines, a flooded subway system where tree roots punch through the ceiling, enough structure to have glitches, enough wildness to disappear in. It's the perfect testbed for a tribute whose real weapon is pattern recognition. From the game maker's perspective, the intent is simple. High spectacle. Clear zones radiating out from a central plaza, each with its own theme. Canopy District, Flooded District, Tower District, designed to funnel tributes inward as resources dwindle. Mid-game hazards roll through on cue. Controlled fires in the lower jungle, mutt sweeps through the alleys, timed blackouts that force confrontations when the cameras are ready. The rule set is tuned for drama. The boundary is a disguised vertical forest wall. Touch it, and you get a non-lethal shock the first time, a lethal one the second, so the Capitol can replay that one mistake moment in slow motion. Mutt types are hybrid too. Vine snakes that slither through rebar, monkey mutts that move across balconies, and aquatic mutts in the subway tunnels to punish anyone who thinks underground equals safe. Weather cycles are on a predictable 12-hour loop. Morning fog in the jungle streets, blistering midday heat on exposed rooftops, engineered thunderstorms every night. Water and food are unevenly distributed. Clean rooftop cisterns near the center, sketchy ground-level puddles at the edges. The message to every district watching is clear. You want safety. You move toward the kill box. And our tribute, they're about to walk into this arena, smile for the cameras, and pretend they don't see any of it. In the next section, this is where we talk about how they test every rule, map every cycle, and start breaking the games in ways the capital doesn't even notice until it's far too late. Meet our tribute, the capital's favorite background character. So if they're about to test every rule, we need to ask, who is this tribute the capital barely bothers to film? At face value, they're nothing special. District 3, electrician's kid, the kind of person the cameras cut away from to get another shot of the career pack polishing spears. Back home, they weren't a rebel, a poacher, or a secret combat prodigy. They were an apprentice line inspector, the one who walked the perimeter, checked junction boxes, logged outages. Boring, right. Except that job trained you to see patterns. You notice when a light flickers off beat, when a transformer hums wrong, when the same sector goes down every Thursday at 14 o'clock. You learn to walk through dangerous spaces without touching the wrong thing. And you learn to keep your mouth shut around peacekeepers who don't want to hear that the system is failing. So when they reach the training center, they already understand the relationship between visibility and danger. High score means attention. Attention means interference. We're going to cover how they avoid all of that before the arena even loads. Their performance, painfully average. They fumble a spear throw so badly it clatters off the wall. They forget which end of the trident to hold. They get winded halfway up the climbing wall and laugh it off, cheeks red, hands slipping. The game makers mark them down as nervous, underconditioned, maybe smart enough to wire a snare, but not smart enough to be a problem. Here's the real question. If you were a tribute who planned to dissect the arena, would you ever show that in a room full of capital technicians taking notes? So they save the real skills for things that look harmless, not tying, but with a quiet focus on tension and load. Camouflage, but mostly studying how pigments smear, how long it takes sweat to dry under studio lights. They spend extra time at the fire starting station, not to get faster, but to test how the airflow in the room shifts when the vents cycle. There is a lot to uncover here, and they're already doing it. Interviews turn them into a punchline the capital finds endearing for about 5 minutes. The stylist puts them in something soft, slightly oversized, adorkable. They stammer, crack an unintentional sounding joke about tripping over their own feet in training, and blush when the audience laughs. The host leans in, reassures them, milks the nervous smiles. By the end, they're the tribute you remember as, oh, the sweet one from the tech district. What was their name again? That part matters because narrative threat is almost as dangerous as physical threat. The careers are framed as a symbol. Our tribute is framed as background. Inside, the plan is brutally clear. Use that low score as a cloak. Avoid early alliances. Alliances mean cameras, and cameras mean edits you can't control. Treat the arena as a machine with inputs and outputs. Much releases, cannon timing, weather shifts, force field responses. Test, observe, log. Repeat. The capital calls them a background tribute. We're going to call them something else, the most dangerous person in the arena. And in the next section, we'll watch the moment the arena starts realizing it, even if the capital doesn't. Days 1-3, surviving the scripted bloodbath. So when the gong finally slams through the arena, they're not thinking, how do I win the games? At face value, their cornucopia strategy looks cliché. They hang back, feet glued to the plate a half second too long, eyes wide, breathing fast. It reads as fear. It is not. They've already decided no weapons bigger than what they can hide, no supplies they can't sprint with, no hero run towards the Golden Horn. Why rush into the Capitol's favorite opening montage when you can stand just outside the frame and watch who they've pre-selected to survive? So they move late, deliberately clumsy. They grab a small pack, a knife, a canteen, maybe a length of cord. Essentials only. The careers and high scorers charge in, and the cameras follow the promise of blood. Here's the real question. What do you do when you know the spectacle is a trap, not just for tributes, but for information? You let it happen. You use it. While everyone else is screaming, they're counting. First cannon, how many seconds after the kill? Second cannon, is there a delay if 2 tributes die at once? That part matters because it tells you how automated the system is versus how much a bored game maker has to push a button. They clock which direction the first mutts spill from. Are they herding survivors toward water, cliffs, or a central kill zone? There is a lot to uncover here if you're willing to look past the blood. Back then, early tributes treated day 1 as pure chaos. Now, this tribute treats it as calibration. They mark where the first landmines go off, where the ground suddenly smokes, where a tribute steps 1 meter too far and the force field flashes, and every time they pretend it was an accident they noticed. A flinch, a stumble, a lucky dodge. Night 1, they don't burrow into the safest spot. They pick high ground with just enough exposure that the cameras can find them, but not enough that anyone else wants to climb. While other tributes huddle, they're quietly scratching notches into bark, or stones, or the crumbling edge of a rooftop. 1 mark for sunset, 1 for the anthem, 1 for the cannons. We're going to cover why that tiny ritual is so dangerous to the Capitol. It turns the arena from a mystery into a schedule. Toss a pebble toward a glimmering patch of air. Watch how fast it rebounds. Drop food scraps to see which insects arrive and from which direction. Sip from a puddle, then wait, counting heartbeats, to see if the anthem distorts or the air hums. Any sign of chemical triggers. This is where we talk about relationship, not between tributes, but between the arena's rules and the people trapped inside it. On camera, though, they sell something else. They hesitate at forks in the terrain, turning their heads slowly, jaw tense, as if they can't decide which way to run. They whisper to themselves, eyes darting, putting on the performance of a scared kid who survived the bloodbath by accident. The Capitol loves that story. Low threat, high sympathy, easy to edit. Meanwhile, in their head, the map is taking shape. Safe zones aren't truly safe. They're just places the game makers haven't used yet. Scripted zones are obvious, too symmetrical, too cinematic, too perfect for a twist. By the end of day 3, they know where the mutts sleep, how long before storm cycles reset, which trees carry the faint buzz of hidden wiring. The districts see a lucky, unimportant tribute clinging to life. The arena, very quietly, has just been reverse engineered. And in the next phase, when the Capitol tries to tighten control, they're going to discover what happens when their background tribute starts pushing back on the script. Days 4 to 7, building a hidden base in the arena's blind spot. So what happens when all that quiet mapping finally pays off? When the arena that's supposed to be airtight suddenly isn't? You don't find the blind spot on purpose. You stumble into it on a retreat, cutting through what should be a routine death trap. A narrow service alley between two artificial rock faces the cameras usually adore. Only this time, the lens doesn't follow. The hovering drone that's been buzzing your shoulder all morning drifts away. At face value, it's nothing, a glitch, a board operator. But here's the real question. Why would the Capitol ever let the feed go dark on purpose in a live arena? That part matters because you've spent days cataloging where the cameras linger, which clearings become stages, which streams get close-ups of tributes washing blood from their hands. This place doesn't fit any of those patterns, so you test it. Not dramatically, not in a way that screams system exploit to the control room. A pebble tossed at the cliff wall, another at the ground where the grass meets the rock. You watch for the telltale shimmer of a force field, the crackle, the ozone smell. Nothing. A squirrel scampers straight through the boundary line you've drawn in your head and doesn't fry. It just vanishes into a tangle of vines the drones never frame. We're going to cover what makes this so dangerous for the Capitol. Game makers rely on predictable responses. Touch the edge, get shocked, cross the line, trigger mutts. You push a thicker branch into the same space, ready to yank back. Still nothing. No boom, no hovercraft, no thunderclap warning. The arena, for a few square meters, forgets to be the games. This is where we talk about turning a flaw into a fortress. You slip through the vines and find a shallow pocket in the rock, just deep enough to curl up in. Over the next hours, then days, you expand it without ever making it cinematic. No big fires, no dramatic shelter building montage. Just one more branch woven into the outer foliage each time you return. Mud smeared in deliberate streaks to break the outline. Scavenged fabric threaded through leaves to distort your silhouette. You rig alarms that wouldn't impress a career, but that's the point. A line of hollow reeds filled with pebbles, strung low where a human foot would catch. A suspended strip of foil from a sponsor wrapper that flutters if the wind pattern shifts around a body. You cache food and water in 3 separate crevices, never storing enough in one place to make a single cannon worth the Capitol's effort. And you don't hide all the time. That would raise questions. Instead, you move on a schedule the audience never realizes exists. You've mapped when the mutts sweep the riverbank, when the artificial storm rolls through the treetops, when the anthem plays just long enough to mask your sprint across an exposed ridge. You venture out only in those predictable safe windows, grabbing supplies, staging quick, messy encounters that read as lucky escape on the broadcast. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between what the districts see and what actually happens. On screen, your story becomes dead air, long stretches of nothing, easily cut, easily summarized as still alive somewhere. The Capitol keeps the promise of chaos by showing only your near misses, never the pattern behind them. To them, you're background. To the arena, you're a ghost. And the moment the game makers finally notice that ghost is coming from a place they can't quite see, that's where the next phase of this quiet rebellion starts. Endgame. Forcing everyone else into the game makers' traps. So when the ghost finally shows up on their screens, it's during cleanup. We're down to the last handful of tributes. This is the part of the games where the Capitol gets impatient. Hazards ramp up, mutts cycle faster, storms close in tighter. At face value, it looks random and chaotic, the arena itself getting angry. But here's the real question. What happens when one tribute understands the schedule better than the game makers think they do? This is where we talk about movement as a weapon. Our tribute never tries to outmuscle the careers. They outroute them. They start leaving traces, but not the kind that scream, trail, a torn strip of fabric snagged on a branch that points straight toward a ravine the mutts use as a highway. Boot prints pressed heavier in the direction of the lightning field they know will trigger at dusk. Just enough evidence that a paranoid tribute will follow, convinced they're hunting. And then there's sound, a clatter of rocks in the west just before the daily firestorm rolls through that sector, a snapped branch glimpsed by a distant camera when the hovercraft shadow passes overhead, so the Capitol dutifully cuts together a sighting package and beams it to every screen. The remaining tributes aren't just tracking each other, they're tracking the edit. Our victor in the making counts on that relationship between fear and broadcast. If the cameras show you running east, someone will move east. We're going to cover how precise this gets, because there is a lot to uncover here. The arena runs on cycles. Mutt releases at the top of the hour, acid fog that creeps in every third night from the same valley, a storm front that sweeps diagonally across the map at noon, reliable enough that even the birds adjust. While everyone else treats these as punishments, our tribute treats them as train timetables. You don't fight the train, you nudge people onto the tracks 30 seconds before it arrives. So one tribute chases those planted tracks into a tunnel right before the mutt's feeding run. Another scrambles across a dead field just as the lightning grid resets, weapon raised, becoming the tallest and only conductive point. On camera, it plays as tragic bad luck. Off camera, it's a clock striking on schedule. The final confrontation barely earns the name. Cornered on a crumbling cornice above a gorge, our tribute looks exhausted, weapon low, every inch the accidental survivor the Capitol loves. Their opponent lunges, the structure, already weakened by earlier quakes the tribute mapped days ago, gives way. Rock shears off, a misfired arrow ricochets into a gas pocket, the ledge collapses. One cannon, one stunned, shaking winner staring down at the dust. The Capitol's edit writes itself. A humble victor from a nothing district who just kept surviving, who never challenged the system, who proves that hope is still possible if you endure. That part matters because it keeps the promise of the games intact. No one in the districts is supposed to ask why so many deaths lined up perfectly with the arena's own rhythms, but someone will. And when they start replaying those last days frame by frame, the real pattern doesn't stay buried. It detonates. The Capitol's edit versus what really happened. So when that pattern detonates, the Capitol has a problem. Not in the arena, in the edit bay. Because the first thing they do is rebuild the story. On the official recap, your games are soft focus and perfectly scored. The key moments are trimmed into clean emotional beats. The close call at the cornucopia, the miraculous sponsor gift that arrives just in time, the teary goodbye over a fallen ally. At face value, every turn in your survival gets framed as fate, or luck, or the generosity of some anonymous Capitol fan who saw something in you. Here's the real question. What happens to everything that doesn't fit that version? This is where we talk about the cuts. All those hours you spent throwing pebbles at the tree line to test the boundary? gone. The long boring stretches in the blind zone where cameras kept glitching and mutts never crossed the line, condensed into a single wide shot with a voiceover about our victor's lonely struggle. Any whispered conversation about how the cannons always fired on a predictable delay, or how the fog only rolled in on the half hour, reframed as you listening to your instincts. Notice the pattern. Every time you brush against arena mechanics, the edit swaps in something softer: courage, heart, the power of hope. Why? Because a tribute who maps time-based MUT releases and force field reactions isn't a protagonist in a tragic spectacle. They're a systems analyst, and the Capital cannot air that. So we're going to cover how they fix you in post. In the studio interviews, Caesar doesn't ask, "When did you realize the boundary had a lag?" He asks, "What were you feeling when you thought you might die?" The script steers you toward relationships. Your district partner, the ally you couldn't save, the promise you made to your family. Planning becomes panic. Observation becomes a gut feeling. Any mention of watching animal behavior to trace safe paths, that gets translated into, "I just followed the birds. I trusted nature." It sounds harmless. It isn't, because now we have two audiences. The districts see a modest, relatable winner who survived on heart and a few sponsor gifts. Someone who proves that if you endure, the games might reward you. That part matters because it keeps the relationship between suffering and reward intact. No one is supposed to ask why your kills lined up with power outages, or why you were always one step ahead of the flood. But up in security, they're watching a different cut. They have the raw feeds. They see the way you stayed just inside the dead zones, how you probed the force field with sticks, how you stopped reacting to mutts and started predicting them. To them, you're not an underdog, you're a proof of concept that the arena is readable. And the most dangerous victories in Panem are the ones the audience never really sees. The Capital does. Which raises the next question: what do they do with a victor who's already solved their favorite weapon? What our hidden victor reveals about the games. So what does the Capital do with a victor who's already solved their favorite weapon? They bury them. At face value, our hidden victor's run looks boring. Low training score, no big alliances, barely any on-screen kills. But if you zoom in on the moves, you see the real game. They play dumb so the cameras drift away. They quietly map MUT release times and weather cycles. They throw pebbles at force fields to test bounce and burn. And then they let the arena do the killing for them. Other tributes sprint towards the cornucopia. This one sprints towards the patterns. That part matters because it exposes how fragile the arena actually is. We're told the game makers are omnipotent, that they can kill you with a dial turn. But every complex system has seams, timers, cooldowns, blind spots. When a tribute survives by exploiting those glitches and staying narratively small, they're proving the games aren't a god, they're a machine. And machines can be learned. Here's the real question. What happens to a regime whose main weapon only works if people believe it's unbeatable? The relationship between the Capital and the games runs on performance. The control room has to look infallible. The arena has to feel inescapable. The victor has to seem chosen, not clever. So when someone wins by outsmarting the map instead of outfighting the careers, the Capital's first instinct isn't to celebrate, it's to edit. This is where we talk about storytelling as violence. The Capital's real weapon isn't just mutts or poison fog, it's the edit bay. They decide which victors become legends with Capital-wide tours and which ones get one awkward interview and a quiet house at the edge of Victor's village. They replay Katniss's berries, Finnick's charm, Johanna's rage. But the tribute who used squirrel paths to trace force field lines, suddenly their games were uneventful. A footnote. A boring year. There is a lot to uncover here, because once you see that, you can't unsee it. In a system running for 75 years, is it really plausible that every single victor played the role the Capital wanted? Or is it more realistic that multiple tributes from multiple districts figured out small hacks, water cycles, dead zones, glitchy traps, and then got written out of the myth so the promise of Capital omnipotence stayed intact? And that leads to a bigger political question. If hidden victors are inevitable, what else is the Capital hiding? Every time you skim a mention of a quiet victor from District 7, inches or a dull games with low ratings, you have to wonder, is that boredom real? Or is it a cover story for someone who quietly broke the system first? Because once you accept that the arena has rules, you start asking where else the rules might crack. And that's where our next step goes. What happens when a victor who sees those cracks starts living in Victor's village, staring at the Capital's prize from the inside? If you were the hidden victor, because once a victor moves into Victor's village with their eyes open, the arena doesn't stay behind. It follows them home. So here's the real question. If you were that hidden victor, the one the Capital thinks is safe and housebroken, how would you start testing the system without ever stepping back into the games? Would you rather be the obvious threat, the career with the perfect score and the perfect snarl, or the tribute the game makers forget to worry about until it's far too late? If you were in the arena tomorrow, would you walk in swinging? Or would you play the ghost, the background extra who just happens to survive every random disaster? And what's the very first rule you'd poke, the first quiet test you'd run to see where the edges of the arena actually are? This is where we talk about terrain, because the arena isn't neutral. At face value, a clock arena feels unbeatable, right? But there is a lot to uncover here. Time-based mutts, repeating hours, predictable weather cycles. That part matters because patterns are the one thing a clever tribute can exploit. Would you map the hours with scratches on a rock? Track cannon timing to guess where the real danger zones are? Or maybe you'd pick jungle, dense cover, water systems, animals whose behavior tells you more truth than any Capital announcement. Frozen arenas punish the strong and reward the patient. Urban arenas turn every window into surveillance, every sewer into a hidden route. So tell me in the comments, which arena, clock, jungle, frozen, urban, do you think hides the biggest exploitable flaw, and why? And if you were designing your own hidden victor, who are they? District 3 with a talent for circuits, quietly throwing pebbles at force fields to see how they bounce? District 7, counting tree species to figure out which sections were grown in a rush by game makers and might hide structural weaknesses? District 12, pretending to be clueless about strategy while mapping food sources and mutt patrol paths in their head? We're going to cover the big names, but I want your versions too. Give them one rule of the games they'd quietly break. Do they refuse to play the narrative threat role and keep their kill count low so the capital's editors barely notice them? Do they test the boundary every night, just enough to learn how the arena responds, without triggering a full course correction from the control room? On this channel, we're going to cover more of those systemic weak points in Panem, why sponsorship economics really decide who lives, how rebellion logistics have to work when every train line and broadcast belongs to the capital, and what the long-term relationship between Victor's and Snow's government actually costs both sides. So if you want to be part of a little Victor's village of overthinkers, you know what to do to stay here. Because the games are full of victors the capital underestimated. The real question is, how many more are hiding in the history of Panem? And what did it cost the capital to keep their stories buried?